I'd like to call the 6:30 Board of Aldermen work session to order. Mayor Boley will be absent for this work session. He should be here for the regular session. We have one item on the agenda, the fiscal year 22 budget. Stephen, this is your Super Bowl.
All right, hear me okay? Okay. All right, well, it's a pleasure to come to you tonight and discuss the fiscal year 2022 year-end financial review. In doing this, I just want to wish the entire governing body and their families a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year as we approach that season, and hopeful for a great 2023. I want to get started tonight. We get started tonight with a review of our city's general fund, and I'll roll it ahead here. Go backwards. Okay, I've got it figured out, Linda. Thanks. So we took a look at the performance in fiscal year 2022 for the general fund. We originally budgeted to start this year with about 3.4 million in fund balance. Based upon how we finished 2021. We finished ahead of that by about $300,000. So that put us in a really nice fiscal position for this year. When we talk about the general fund revenue performance, this was really a positive spot in this year's fiscal activity. In our original budget that we adopted revenues of 4.9 million. As we came down the stretch this year, we forecasted to bring in about 5.3, and we brought in about 5.5. So really the last 2 to 3 months of fiscal year 2022, we saw better than expected sales tax performance. We also saw better than expected interest earnings. As we've seen that interest rate climb and interest rates increase, the earnings on the cash balance at the bank also increased. And so it really supplemented the forecast and provided us with some additional revenues. So when we look overall there in the middle column, we finished 630,000 above budget. When we switch over to expenditures, our original budget had a budgeted amount of 5.7 million. Along this way in fiscal year 2022, the board approved a number of budget amendments, and I'll touch on those in the next slide. But those budget amendments gave us a higher level of budgeted authority, gave us a level of 5.9 million. And this year we ended up spending very close to that. We spent about 99% of that fully authorized budget. So we were very efficient this year on expenditures at 5.8. On the original budget, the ending cash balance, we were going to go down to 2.6. But because of that increased revenue performance, we finished with 3.4, along with the activity that was bolstered in 2021. Like I said, on the revenue side this year, there was really 4 main areas that we saw some really good performance in. We saw it in property tax this year. We beat that budget. We saw it in sales tax. We really saw it in use tax. And I've got some charts to share with you. We'll look at some year-over-year performance. And then also the motor fuel tax. Back in October of 2021, last year, we added 2.5 cents to the motor fuel tax rate. And then again, this July, we increased that rate to 22 cents. And so those dollars have allowed our city to take advantage of those increased revenues and provide further services in the street department and then in our roads and maintenance. On the expenditure side, we had a couple key budget amendments this year that put us over the budget. That added additional budget authority for expenditures that we needed to do. And one of those is pictured on the right there. It was some of the debris that the public works staff worked with, I think it was Ace Pipe Cleaning, get the reinforced concrete box cleaned out and get that cleaned up. We also implemented our class and compensation study, which helped with employee retention and continuing to make investments in employees. When we talk about our fund balance analysis, what you're looking at here is a 6-year trend of our reserve guideline, which was at 40% for quite some time. Earlier this year, the board took some action to lower that reserve down to 25%. Over time, we've typically maintained anywhere between 60 and 80% in our fund balance as a percentage of operating expenditures. This year, that percentage went down to 58%. Really, the overall theme here is we're really starting to use some of our resources that we have on tap, but we're also maintaining our fund balance. So we're still in a really good, healthy financial position, but we are able to use those resources to make investments in the community. I want to touch on here before we leave the general fund, just about some of the those major revenues and how they've performed over the last 3 fiscal years. You can see here the growth in the 1% city sales tax. This year in 2022, our receipts increased by 4.6%. So it indicates we still have a strong, healthy economy in the city. We'll look at city use tax. We've seen this category really increase over time. A lot of factors in here, but one of them is, kind of the changing consumer behaviors and making purchases online versus retail. And some of those consumer habits shifting and changing to make online purchases have resulted in some pretty increased use tax receipts. When we compare 2021 to 2022, we saw an increase of about 23% over last year in use tax receipts. Last one to touch upon is, or second to last one to touch upon is the property tax receipts. This year we saw our property tax receipts eclipse the $1 million mark, which was great to see. That property tax provides about 20% of our general fund revenues that go towards paying for core city services. In this fiscal year, our property tax receipts increased by about 8% over last year, so it's great to see. Finally, I touched upon the motor fuel tax and some of the changes we've seen in the motor fuel tax rate going up a couple cents and a half, a couple times in the past year and a half. That increase in that rate has resulted in more revenue as well. So we've gone from about 220 up to 260. That was an increase of about 17% over fiscal year 2021. That leads me to show you the bottom line for the current budget year, fiscal year 2023. When we set up 2023, we began this year at 3.3 million, and we're going to roll into that with 3.4 million, and that's your actual and beginning cash balance. And so we'll monitor this year, monitor the revenue performance, expenditure performance, but we're expected to utilize fund balance. We have a lot of capital needs, capital budgeted projects this year in the general fund, and so we'll use some of those monies as we continue to spend down that reserve. And of course, we're still going to maintain our 25%, but we are starting to utilize some of those resources. Any questions on that before I move to the next fund? Okay. We'll go on and talk about the water and sewer fund. Let's see here. On the water and sewer fund, when we originally adopted the fiscal year 2022 budget, we budgeted to start this year with 4.6 million in cash. We actually started the year with 5.6. It really was dependent on when projects were getting paid, and those payments happening in 2022 shifted that cash balance up. On the revenue side, you look at the revenue row, one of the big things that's going to stick out to you is how much better revenues were in 2022 than what we had budgeted at 5.1. The biggest factor there is going to be the Clay County ARPA monies that the city received that supplements the raw water pump station. And of course, a majority of that is covered by our direct treasury ARPA monies that we received. But the rest of it was supplemented by Clay County. So along the way, the board approved a budget amendment that brought in that revenue. but originally we hadn't planned for that. So that $805,000 supplemented the water and sewer fund this year, and it really provided for some better fiscal performance than we had originally thought. It was all dependent on whether they would approve those disbursements to the city. They did that, and so we're fortunate to have that. On the expenditure side, we budgeted 6.4 in expense, and we only spent 4.9. And to kind of go into that a little bit, I'll take you down to the bottom half of the slide here. We had some expenditure savings that allowed us to finish under budget this year. It really comes down to finishing remaining contracts this year and also some project pushback. So our engineering for the west bypass for the 144th Street lift station, we're continuing to work on that with HDR engineering. You can see the progress of the raw water pump station on the right side of the screen with the station getting built. We had some projects that were pushed back that we had budgeted for 2022. We're going to get those done in 2023 with those monies. So they really just roll over into the next year. When we look at 2023, what we budgeted versus forecasted, you're going to see the first thing that comes up is some red. When we set the budget up for 2023, I had originally anticipated some of those bills were going to get paid in 2023. Chuck got them in pretty quick. We got some more of the projects paid than I had anticipated. And so we actually start this year with a little bit less than what we had budgeted. But really, from an overall standpoint, it's not a financial concern. It was just dependent on when we would pay some of those pay-apps out. This year, one of the themes that we talked about in the budget workshop was how capital heavy 2023 is going to be. We talked about in the CIP how we have nearly an $11 million capital budget, and about $7 million of that is in water and sewer. So it's a really significant year for making capital investments and improvements in the water and sewer fund. So that's something that I'll keep you informed on as we move through this fiscal year is that expenditure progress and that capital progress. Before I move on, is there any other questions about that water and sewer activity? Okay. Talk about the next set of funds. I'll talk about our 3 special sales taxes. And in this year, Matt and his team worked hard to bring us Diamond Crest Neighborhood Park, pictured on the right. And then Chuck and the street staff and other public works staff, we worked to get our 2022 road program completed. And there's a couple photos of the progress out at Diamond Creek that was completed. So again, those brought park amenities to the city, improved roads and maintenance to the city this year. Look at the transportation sales tax fund in review. When we look at 2022, what we'd originally budgeted and what we brought in, where we started about $40,000 better. On the revenue side, we saw increased revenue performance. And on the expenditure side, really the only thing that we did not expend in this year's budget was expenditures related to 4th Street and 4th Terrace. We're going to get going on that project this year, so those funds roll over. Otherwise, we used everything else in transportation sales tax this year that we had planned. Because of that better revenue performance and rolling those funds over, we're going to start this year with about $430,000 in fund balance. And when we look at 2023, we'll start a little bit better than what was forecasted because of that increased revenue performance. We'll get those projects finished up. We've got a 2023 street maintenance program, 4th Street Terrace. And we have some contributions for Quincy Boulevard improvements from this fund this year. So this fund's looking good fiscally for this year and looking at our 5-year CIP. So our capital improvement sales tax, we'd originally budgeted to start this fund with 210 and we began with 254. Again, we saw great revenue performance this year. And then really the only thing that we didn't expend this year was finishing up the streetscape phase 3 engineering contract with HDR. So We're going to continue to pay off that contract this year and then get ready for the construction phase out there to finish off our downtown streetscape 3 work. With that increased revenue performance and lower expenditures, we finished this year with $410,000. And as we go into next year, we have streetscape phase 3 construction, Quincy Boulevard improvements. So it's a lot of expense will be coming out of that fund. You'll see higher than normal revenues. Sales tax gives us about $650,000. We also have grant revenue associated with that streetscape phase 3 that will hit this fund this year as we get that project done. The park and stormwater sales tax. Here we budgeted $340. We started the year with $437. Again, revenues outperformed the budget. And then on the expense side, the one item that we didn't expend this year was expenses budgeted for a stormwater master plan. Of course, many of you are involved tonight in the stormwater open house over at the senior center. The city's making efforts to work on stormwater discovery. We've budgeted that for 2023. So that's why you see a little bit lower expense in this budget year that we just finished up. We're taking some action and doing the discovery phase first so we can get a plan in place. We ended 2022 with 809 in fund balance. And I apologize, this graph got caught off at the bottom, but we had budgeted to end this year with 924 in fund balance in 2023. And based upon what we're bringing in at 809 this year, we'll probably look at finishing close to $1 million this year in fund balance. And one thing we've talked about in the budget process is we're trying to get enough funds in the park and stormwater so we can start working on some of those bigger signature projects in the park and rec master plan. That's one of the larger goals that we've identified. Any questions on those items? Okay. Move on and talk about the sanitation fund. Looking at the sanitation fund, this really just is an internal service fund that's in and out. In 2022, we had budgeted to begin with $58,000. We started this year with $62,000. And then when we look at our performance, one thing that's going to stick out is the revenues versus expense. On the revenue side, we brought in 813. On expenditures, we expended 818. So we used a little bit of fund balance. One of the things we worked on earlier this year with staff was to look at the implementation of the senior rate and make sure that all got reflected in the GFL billing. And I think there's a little bit of that that's involved in using fund balance. But we got that trued up in that billing so that all our senior rates that we're charging out are reflected in the billing. We did use a little bit of fund balance, but it isn't anything that's concerning from a financial perspective. The big goal here with this fund is to make sure we can continue to offer some rate flexibility and that we can make adjustments as needed. We just want to carry enough fund balance that we have that flexibility, but we don't want to carry an alarming amount of fund balance in here. So, trying to keep this at $50,000 to $60,000 to $70,000 is kind of your adequate fund balance. So fiscally, we're good to go for 2022. In 2023, again, we're just trying to keep between that $50,000 and $70,000 range in the cash balance for the sanitation fund. You'll see the revenues and expenditures do go up as we had a rate increase with GFL. And the last fund I want to touch on tonight before we wrap up is our vehicle and equipment replacement fund. We're now in year 2 of our lease agreement or our agreement to lease vehicles with Enterprise. A lot of departments have received new vehicles. Some departments were continuing to wait on their vehicles. I'm so hopeful that the police department gets some of their vehicles here in the next couple months, some of their new police vehicles they're really in need of. So we're keeping tabs on that, communicating with Enterprise. We've had success with other departments in getting new pieces of equipment replaced. We got Streets and utilities set up with new attachments for their Bobcats, new utilities lawnmower. So this fund is allowing us to get new vehicles in that are more efficient and also replace aging equipment, helping our departments get the jobs done better, more effectively. So happy to see that happening in this fund. So it's a sensitive mouse. Looking at 2022, we started this year. This is our second year for the VERF. We started with about $25,000 in fund balance. You'll notice on the revenue line, we brought in 368. We only budgeted 284. The big factor there is the first bullet point. When we budgeted to have 3 new police vehicles, we just budgeted an expenditure in the police department. But after conversations with the chief and Cynthia, we transferred those monies from the general fund to the VERF so that we could lease those vehicles with Enterprise and get the vehicles rolling on that. So we had some additional revenue, but it's really just an internal transfer. On the expenditure side, you'll see we did go above the original budget of 175. I talked to Enterprise as the year went on, and we had some increased lease costs as vehicles and inflationary factors crept in. From a fund balance perspective, it wasn't a problem because we were also seeing really incredible gains on vehicles as we sold them back to Enterprise. So our in-house vehicles and our leased vehicles brought, exceptional values at auction, which helped offset some of those lease costs. When we look at 2023, our goal in this fund is to start building up a healthy fund balance so we can start to do more with equipment. One of the goals, I think, for 2024 and talking with Cynthia is to get kind of a more robust equipment replacement program going. And I know Gina and Myra have been involved in that and in building a plan. Part of that also just includes the financing and the resources to do that. So we're going to be looking at that for this fund in 2024 and making sure we have the fund balance in that to accomplish those goals. So we'll monitor the performance in 2023 of how our lease costs stack up against our sale prices of our vehicles. That concludes the 2022 year-end update. If you have any questions, I can answer them if you do. What you got?
Stephen, how many more vehicles are we waiting for from 2022? And what about the replacement for 2023? As far I was trying to see how far we're backed up and when we're going to catch up, hopefully.
Yeah, that's a great question, Alderman Russell. So originally, when we set out with Enterprise, we were looking to do about 30 vehicles. And that didn't include the police vehicles at the time. So the chief's still waiting on 8 2023 Interceptors. So putting 8 together with 30 gives us about 38 total leased vehicles. And I think last time I looked at the dashboard, we had about 20 leased. So we still have a little bit to go, and we have some more complex vehicles that are getting built. Like, one of the park's boom trucks is on order, Matt. And so that's a vehicle that can take a little bit of time to produce, manufacture, and get out to us. So, but the big thing at the end of 2022 is we started to see an uptick in getting those vehicles to us, because for a while the supply chain was difficult. Especially in mid 2022, just getting vehicles, but it's starting to catch up and we're starting to see some of them trickle in.
All right, well, we're done with that then. Can I get a motion to adjourn the work session?
Motion to adjourn. Second.
All right. All those in favor say aye. All those that say no, say nay. All right, we are adjourned.
Does he need the sheet?
That was a check for Pike County Court. $14,000.
That's for the